You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. This should not have been a surprise to me, but of the four components of a successful revenue effort, people, process, data, and technology, our guests on the podcast overwhelmingly emphasized the people component. As we reflected on what our guests shared more specifically in this area, it came down to two things: leadership and culture. No investment in improving your processes, data, and technology in a company will have any sustainable value if your leadership and culture need a lot of work. The majority of our successful and experienced guests pointed to the foundational value of culture and the impact it has on so many aspects in a company. It was no coincidence that it was proven leaders who kept highlighting the importance of culture in their success. Let's hear what some of them said. I only learned much later in life that they only really track three things once they're up in the air. I think that's the same way that the leader of any functional area of a business or a CEO thinks. It's like, what are my three, you used the term OKRs earlier, what metrics, OKRs, KPIs, whatever it is. What are the three that I'm watching every day? And only if one of those is off, then I can go and dig a little deeper. So in the case of the pilot, as long as their direction is what it should be, their altitude is what they should, and their velocity or their speed is what it should be, they're fine. And if one of those suddenly changes for some reason, then they can start digging into, well, why is our direction off or why is our speed down? Which comes back, of course, to how data is really so integrated into all this. And you cannot manage what you cannot measure.
That's very true. We say that around here too.
I'm sure you do. Knowing Tom, I'm sure that's very much part of what,
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool.
Well, have you had any projects recently with clients that you found particularly exciting or maybe had a better result than you expected and was a big win for the team internally?
Oh, man, there's several of those. I think without giving names, we've had a couple clients that we really helped them improve their operations in terms of, the utilization, project margins, visibility to the future. And that, I believe, helped them to get acquired by a larger entity. And now we're talking to that larger entity to see, because they're looking at our customers saying, you guys have some great best practices. Can we apply those to other parts of our sister companies? So that's very satisfying to help a company that we helped, go from here to here. And now we're going to maybe help their parent company to apply to their sister company. So we'll see where that goes.
You have to have a vision that's big enough that other talented people want to be a part of it. So that was the stress test. I've watched so many companies adopt EOS and they build it wonderfully and built a wonderful vision for them and their current leadership team and the size of that enterprise. But I believe you have to build a vision that is grand enough where other talented people can see their own success in it. And to answer your question specifically, it's worked really well with franchising, right? People that have a really grand vision and have a vision of success for themselves, they can see that success inside of the entire kind of Discover Strength vision. But we had wonderful conversations around, is this still relevant? Are our core values relevant as we move to franchising? Is this purpose relevant as we move to franchising? And of course, we found out that, yeah, it's relevant. Now, the franchisee will still have to pick things like, what's our 1-year goal? What's our 1-year plan? And what's our 3-year picture look like? But for the most part, we say the vision component applies to the entire brand, the entire system.
How do you create a culture which motivates them? And obviously, HubSpot's culture code has evolved over the years too. And we've implemented ERGs, employee relationship groups that really recognize various groups that we have within the business and support them and provide resources as well as programming and honing in on what those programs are and making choices around where we want to invest and what resonates with our business, I think is a massive aspect for anyone to be able to participate in and say, hey, I just spent an hour on a live event talking with folks around the globe that want to talk about this subject matter, or we're listening to an HBS professor comes in and is sharing like insight on a case. And that's stuff that allows for you to grow, whether that's personally, professionally. It also allows you sort of to check out from the day to day because it can be, a lot. And when you have a moment of, wow, I just spent an hour, in this different space than I'm normally in. Now I'm going to pick up the phone and have that conversation with the customer or send that email. There's something lifted off of you. And it doesn't, I'm sure it's not perfect, obviously, but I do think that there's no water bubbler moment anymore. There's no chance to bump into someone in the hall and have a really interesting 15-minute conversation.
If your culture was strong before, it will still be strong. We just have to be intentional in different ways, right? To keep it going. And if your culture had major cracks in its foundation before, they're going to be amplified. You're right. It's not the remoteness that caused your culture issues. It was that your capabilities and everything you had built weren't the right things to allow your culture to thrive in a remote environment. So much of what we're saying is a mindset shift. And the companies that get it. And they are going to be the ones that eat everybody else's lunch over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's a growth mindset culture that they're building where we don't know all the answers, right? We're not basing your value here on how smart you are. We need smart people, but we're basing it on how quickly you can fail and learn and be vulnerable and be honest and communicate well so that we can all keep moving forward. And it's a huge shift in the cultural fabric, I think, of the Western business climate right now, that there's a lot of companies that don't yet see how big of a shift it actually is.
What are the things that we do consistently and the cadence? How do we have these conversations? How does communication flow within the organization? How do people align? Where are decisions made is a really important discussion for every organization to have.
Yeah. So I'm a strategic coach. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
So I use a lot of the strategic coach thinking tools. We're now bringing that to more and more leadership, and eventually, because it's all comes back to what you were saying around the people and culture part. It comes down to unique ability of the team that you have and leaning more and more into that unique ability. But while having a very clear structure of what needs to be done as a company, there's a lot of good stuff out there. But you're right. You were talking about that sort of space to think and allowing people space to think and write. And that's been the most helpful thing for me for these, what Dan Sullivan calls the thinking tools that he's created over the last 50 years in Strategic Coach.
I mean, when we do it, we call it Bezosing something because it's the Jeff Bezos model, right? And we take some of those things pretty seriously where it's, you should have shopped it. You should have come back to it. You should have really come up with a recommendation.
I would like to know maybe where your passion lies in the areas that we talk to our guests about most frequently, whether that is people, the process, the data, or technology, that all have to kind of be in alignment and integrated with one another to help grow a business.
Yes. Well, that is easy. Mine is always about the people. No question. I think from even my history has always been in professional services, and it's always been people and service as the product, not necessarily a product as the product. And so where all of those things matter, I always say 3 people, process, systems, but
yeah, data and technology you could combine.
You're adding technology as you can either overlay it or integrate it, but those, regardless, you still need people. You still need people in the thing. So I would say people, culture is definitely, and if I think about sort of a passion, it's truly when I'm at my best or when I feel the best about what I'm doing, it's helping people get to a place where they want to go or where they might not have seen they want to go, like a destination or like, oh, that little thing helped me get beyond where I am today.
Would that be from like a client's perspective or employees or a little bit of both?
Yes. Or somebody I encounter or anything like any regard. It's really how to get to an outcome that somebody wants for themselves is good. Or just helping them see something just a little bit differently than they see.
it's interesting to start seeing the arguments form for both. And then it becomes a thing of like, well, which one seems more critical? And ultimately, ISO is far more comprehensive. But again, for the world that we're getting ourselves into here, SOC 2 is becoming more and more of a necessary evil, for the lack of a...
Pick your tool. For instance, ERPs. There's a lot of ERPs out there. For any given circumstance, there's probably a few that'll work. Pick one, but then implement it, use it in a disciplined manner, maintain it, make it part of your process. We use ISO here. That's one tool. It's not the only tool, but none of these tools are going to work if you don't stick with them, use them properly, set them properly, and have a culture of using them.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.